Kuhn Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @KuhnReview, that is @CuendReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@kuhnreview.com. That is INFORMATION or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the National on Monday 15th September 2025, from the News section. Edinburgh University in talks to return 200 skulls to Africa, by Fiona Brown. A Scottish university is reportedly negotiating the return of skulls in its possession to Africa. As reported by the Scotsman, Edinburgh University has held quite a few talks with both individuals and governments regarding the return of items held in its anatomical museum. It currently holds 185 skulls brought to the capital from the continent as the result of colonial activity, forming part of a collection of almost 2,000 skeletal artefacts. PhD student Ash Charlton, who has studied the skulls in question, said that several were either stolen or taken coercively without consent. Some of the Anatomical Museum's collection originally came from the Edinburgh Phrenological Society, when phrenology was being discredited study of skull shapes and sizes to determine character, intelligence and racial differences. During a Royal Society of Edinburgh event, the Scotsman reports that Charlton said a number of the skulls were somewhat, if not entirely, anonymous, with only 4 linked to verified humans, though 2 of these are thought to be false. The Anatomical Museum has previously repatriated several remains from its 12,000-strong collection, including the return of a skull in 1947 to what is now Sri Lanka, and the 2023 return of remains of 4 tribal warriors from Taiwan killed around 150 years ago. Malcolm McCallum, a curator and researcher at the museum, said during the same event that delays in repatriation tend to come from people trying to think what they can do with their ancestors. We find every single repatriation is different, and the African potential repatriation will be no different from that. We just have to take it on a case-by-case basis when it comes in, he said. McCallum also gave credit to Charlton's research on the skulls, saying it would facilitate a much easier repatriation when the time comes. He also reportedly told the event that Edinburgh University was in discussions with a range of communities and there would be many more repatriations in the coming years. A spokesperson for the university told the Scotsman, "We are committed to learning lessons from our past, including addressing our colonial legacy and its contemporary impact. We work with many communities around the world to engage with our collections and facilitate the return of remains and artefacts." That article was by Fiona Brown. This is from the National on Monday 15th September 2025. From the News section. Survey launched to protect Scotland's ancient trees, by Fiona Brown. Thousands of trees across Scotland are set to be catalogued in a wide-ranging survey aimed at protecting the nation's ancient and native woodlands. The project, launched by the National Trust for Scotland, will cover everything from mountainsides to grounds around castles and stately homes. As reported by STV, the initiative seeks to identify particularly old or unusual specimens, while also preparing for the future by planting younger replacements. Alan Crawford, Senior Nature Conservation Officer at the Trust, said that while some estates hold records of individual trees, no comprehensive data set currently exists. The first step is understanding what we've got, where it is, and how it's distributed, he explained. Ancient and veteran trees, he added, are vital both for the ecosystems they support and the cultural history they represent. Many of the trees set to be surveyed are centuries old, strikingly shaped, and often described as miniature ecosystems in themselves. Each tree surveyed will be classified as ancient, veteran, or notable, depending on its age, condition, and characteristics. Some of these specimens grow in upland areas of native woodland or on rugged crags and gullies. Others are found in lowland landscapes, lining avenues, parklands, and grounds of historic houses. With many trees nearing the end of their lives, the Trust is also focused on ensuring replacements are planted. Crawford warned that while old trees may appear timeless, new generations are not always establishing themselves. We want younger trees to mature and take on the same ecological roles before the old ones disappear, he said. He added that a survey carried out a century earlier would have prevented the loss of several missing generations. Funding for the first phase comes from the People's Postcode Lottery, which has contributed more than £3.4 million to Trust projects in the past decade. That article was by Fiona Brown.
This is from the National, Monday, September 15th, 2025, the Culture section. Why Channel 4 is taking aim at Donald Trump lies this week. Article by Andrew Scott. Channel 4 has announced that it will broadcast a night of programming taking aim at President Donald Trump's lies and mistruths. This will include an impersonator taking on the role of the broadcaster's continuity announcer and reading out false information. The announcement comes just days before the American leader's state visit to the UK. The night of programming will begin on Wednesday, September 17th, the first full day of the President's state visit to the UK. This will begin at 10 p.m. with Donald v. The Truth, which will show the President making 100 falsehoods, distortions, and inaccuracies over the course of his time in office. Donald v. The Truth will run for over 7 hours, with the untrue statements being punctuated by brief, text-based fact checks. The aforementioned impersonator will work as the show's continuity announcer throughout the day, giving out misleading program synopses and exaggerated running times. Discussing the night, Ian Katz, Chief Content Officer at Channel 4, said Donald Trump loves making history. They added that the channel will air what they believe to be the longest uninterrupted reel of untruths, falsehoods, and distortions ever broadcast on television. We hope it will remind viewers how disorienting and dangerous the world becomes when the most powerful man on earth shows little regard for the truth. And if President Trump cares to watch along after the state banquet, he may even clear up a few misconceptions. Channel 4 will also air the second episode of The Donald Trump Show, a 3-part documentary which aims to tell the story of the last 9 months of his presidency. That article was written by Andrew Scott, read by Janet Stein. This is from the National, Monday, September 15, 2025, the Culture section. Alan Cumming thanks Scottish Traders crew in Emmy Special. Article by Lucy Jackson. The Scottish actor accepted the award for Outstanding Reality Competition Program at the Emmy Awards, which were held in Los Angeles on Sunday. In his speech, Cumming said, "Thanks everyone who watches the show and all the people who have traders' parties and dress up as me. We see you and we love you." He added, "Thank you to our crazy cast and crew in Scotland. It's a difficult time we live in, but it is so great that our show brings a little bit of joy into this life. Talking of joy, thank you to my husband Grant Schaefer, who brings joy into my life every single day. Thank you so much." Both the UK and US version of The Traders is filmed at Ardres Castle in the Highlands near Alness. The show beat RuPaul's Drag Race, The Amazing Race, Survivor, and Top Chef in the category at the prestigious awards show. Other big winners of the night include Netflix's Adolescence program, with 15-year-old Owen Cooper becoming the youngest ever male actor to win an Emmy. Several Emmy stars used the evening to condemn Israel's actions in Palestine, including Hannah Einbinder and Javier Bardem. Einbinder, who won Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy, ended her acceptance speech by saying, "Go Birds, F*** ice, and free Palestine." She told media backstage, "I have friends in Gaza who are working as frontline workers, as doctors, right now in the north of Gaza, to provide care for pregnant women and working for school children to create schools in the refugee camps. It's an issue that's really close to my heart for many reasons. I feel like it is my obligation as a Jewish person to distinguish Jews from the state of Israel because our religion and our culture is such an important and long-standing institution that is really separate to the ethno-nationalist state." Meanwhile, Bardem wore a keffiyeh, saying on the red carpet that he cannot work with someone who supports the genocide. That article was written by Lucy Jackson, read by Janet Stein. This is from The National, Monday, September 15, 2025, the Culture section. Stirling Castle opens secret areas to public for first time. Article by Alistair Ferguson. Visitors to Stirling Castle are being offered exclusive access to secret areas that are normally closed to the public for the first time. The daily guided tours, which started on Monday, will give visitors access to approximately 10 hidden areas of the 12th century castle, according to Historic Environment Scotland, HES. Some of the areas will be open to visitors, including the wall walk around the Great Hall roof, which offers stunning views across the castle's royal buildings, the Caponniers, which were firing galleries for riflemen, and the King's Closet, which is located off the King's Bedchamber. According to HES, there is an area in the King's Closet which may have been used as an oratory for private prayer, and is believed that Mary, Queen of Scots, may have used the space for her personal private devotions when in residence at Stirling Castle. The King's Closet also gives access to a narrow, steep private stair leading to the upper level of the royal palace. Dating from James VII's reign onwards, the staircase offered the monarch a private route from his apartments on the principal level of the palace to the apartments of his courtiers and officers of state on the floor above. Another potential stop on the tour is the site of the 18th century governor's kitchen, where archaeological work within the building in 1997 discovered that it stood on the site of a long-forgotten medieval chapel. The use of this space as a chapel was revealed by the discovery of 9 skeletons buried beneath the floor, with the skeletons dating from the 13th to the 16th centuries, and included a 14th century English knight killed during the Wars of Independence, and possibly that of a 16th century regent of Scotland, namely Matthew Stewart, Earl of Lennox, the grandfather of James VI. Visitors will also be able to discover the routes that serving staff would have taken when carrying food from the castle's 16th century great kitchens into the Great Hall for royal banquets and festivities. They will also be able to access 16th century graffiti behind a previously locked door within the Prince's Tower, which could also possibly have been written by the hand of King James VI. In 2007, a section of 16th century plaster was discovered in the King's Old Schoolroom, featuring inscribed words and sentences. Among the graffiti is the possible autograph of the King, as James VI is scrawled across the wall. Ross Blevins, interpretive events and guiding manager at Stirling Castle, welcomed the announcement of the tours, which will offer those interested in delving behind the scenes of the castle unprecedented access. He said, "We are delighted to launch these exclusive new tours for those who are interested in delving behind the scenes of the castle. The tours will be bespoke on the day, depending on the weather, as well as which rooms or areas of the castle we can access, with each tour potentially offering something different for visitors. The stops on this new tour are usually under strict lock and key. Some of the areas have been closed for decades, while others have never before been open to the public. So it is truly a unique visitor experience and a chance to uncover some of the many secrets of Stirling Castle." The guided tours will be limited to 12 people per tour and will start at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. each day. The areas that visitors will get access to are weather dependent and may change each day. The £15 ticket price of the tour is in addition to admission to Stirling Castle. Prices including admission are adult $33.50, concession $30, child 12 years and over $24. Historic Scotland members will receive 10% off Stirling Castle tours, tickets and free admission to the castle. That article was written by Alistair Ferguson, read by Janet Stein.
This is from The National on Tuesday the 16th of September 2025 from the news section. Israel committed genocide in Gaza. UN inquiry confirms. And this article is by Fiona Brown. Israel has committed genocide in Palestine, a United Nations inquiry has found. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Isaac Herzog and former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant are all named in the report as inciting acts of genocide. The inquiry found that 4 of the 5 requirements for an offensive to be considered genocide have been met. Killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Since October the 7th, 2023, Israeli forces have killed almost 65,000 Palestinians and destroyed most of the territory's healthcare infrastructure. The United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OCHR, found that at least 46% of those killed since then were women and children. Deaths of women and children have comprised nearly 60% of total fatalities from March 18th to March 25th, 2025, after Israel broke an agreed ceasefire. In the report, it was found that the life expectancy of Palestinians has dramatically dropped by 46.3%, from 75.7 years to just 40.5 years. Citing a spokesman from the Israeli military who said, "We are focused on what causes maximum damage," the report confirmed that Israel has used heavy, unguided munitions with a wide margin of error in densely populated residential areas. The report reads, "The Commission observed that the Israeli security forces repeatedly subjected urban areas in the Gaza Strip to heavy bombardment with explosive weapons with wide area effect rather than precision-guided or smart weapons, leading to the complete destruction of neighbourhoods." The number of bombs used by Israel since the 7th of October 2023 is extraordinary, even in comparison to other world conflicts. A military expert, also cited in the report, said, "Israel is dropping in less than a week what the United States was dropping in Afghanistan in a year, in a much smaller, much more densely populated area." The UN report said that Israeli forces had deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure in Gaza, such as high-rise buildings and residential apartment blocks. These led to the levelling of entire city blocks and residential neighbourhoods under sustained heavy bombardment. On many occasions, Israeli bombardment has destroyed apartment blocks, killing almost all the civilians therein, it continues. It finds that serious harm as a result of environmental destruction has been inflicted upon those living in the Palestinian territories, with a total of 170,812 structures damaged or completely destroyed. Almost 51 million tonnes of debris is thought to be lining the streets of Gaza, posing serious health risks such as lung cancer and exacerbating existing conditions like asthma and autoimmune diseases. The United Nations Environment Programme estimated that it would take 21 years to clear the debris. The Commission reported that Israeli security forces have expanded their targeting methods in ways that disproportionately harm civilians, including children pulled from rubble with severe injuries. Between October 2023 and June 2025, the World Health Organization recorded 735 attacks on health services, killing 917 people and injuring 1,411, with many survivors left with life-altering disabilities, including loss of limbs, traumatic brain injuries, and damaged internal organs, worsened by the collapse of medical infrastructure. The inquiry also found, after receiving reports from medical professionals who had treated children with direct gunshot and sniper wounds, that Israel was intentionally targeting children in Gaza. It reports that the infliction of sexual violence, including rape and threats of rape, against both men and women has been widespread and systematic, perpetrated in different forms since October the 7th, 2023. The report reads, "Considering the evidence in totality, the Commission finds that the Israeli security forces have intentionally inflicted serious bodily and mental harm on the Palestinians in Gaza. Due to the scale of operations, foreseeable civilian harm, use of destructive methods, widespread sexual and gender-based violence, and Israel's refusal to change tactics despite international warnings, the resulting war crimes and human rights abuses indicate the harm was inflicted intentionally." The report also found that the destruction of healthcare facilities, including a major fertility clinic in 2023, also constituted genocidal activity. The Commission's report concludes that Israel, under the Genocide Convention, committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza and failed to prevent or punish such activity. While limited to Gaza in this period, it raises concerns that the intent to destroy Palestinians extends to the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and is rooted in decades of unlawful occupation and repression aimed at displacing Palestinians. And that article was written by Fiona Brown and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 16th of September 2025 from the news section. Weaponisation of flags shows US culture wars more embedded in UK. This article is by Abby Garton Crosby. The weaponisation of flags is a symptom of the Americanisation of the far right and shows US culture wars have become more embedded in the UK, an expert has said. Siddharth Venkataramakrishnan, editorial manager and analyst at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, said that Christian nationalist elements have also become more prominent. The think tank analyses how the far right operates online, and Venkataramakrishnan has said that there has been a really big increase in anti-immigrant hate in the past few years. There have been several protests outside hotels housing asylum seekers in England and in Scotland, and on Saturday, more than 100,000 people took to the streets of London to take part in Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom protest. Elon Musk, the Tesla billionaire, spoke at the event via video link and called for a revolutionary change of government, telling the crowd that violence is coming and that you either fight back or you die. In recent weeks, St George's Cross flags have been put up across England as part of a push by an ally of Robinson to push an anti-immigrant sentiment. We've seen how the flags have become weaponised, which is, again, much more American than British, Venkataramakrishnan said. Generally, we've seen a shift towards more evidence of Christian nationalist elements, which are more American by nature than the UK far right. You'd have talk of crusades, but less of the kind of American style. You do have American actors who come and speak. Generally, I think the US culture wars have become more embedded in the UK across the board, and that obviously plays out here. As well as Musk, Steve Bannon, a far-right strategist who worked for Donald Trump during his first term in the White House, was also billed as speaking at the London protest. The analyst argues that there has been a transnational shift where rhetoric pushed by the far right has widened out. I realise the rhetoric is like "Make Britain Great Again" or "Make England Great Again," but I think it's usually seen through the lens of "Make the West Great Again," he explained. I think that's what you've seen, that it's shifted in some ways from being Muslims threatening the UK to migrants threatening the West. There's been a broadening of the parameters into the kind of, broadly speaking, Christendom and heathendom in a very bold sense of the world. As in, there are good white people who must be defended from the bad non-white people. I think there's been a shift of the last few years into that much broader rhetoric. We previously told how an expert said that Scotland is at an inflection point with anti-migrant sentiment, and that one incident could be a trigger. A recent incident in Dundee, where police had to issue a warning about misinformation after a child was charged after an incident involving a bladed weapon, was seen as a rallying cry by some elements of the far right. I think the big spike is a lot of anti-migrant actors, both in the UK and globally, took the case in Dundee and ran with it. There was a cryptocurrency named after it which people were selling called Braveheart, Venkataramakrishnan said. I think generally we've seen a much bigger focus on threats to women and girls from migrants over the past year than we did even last year. He added that the nature of the far right has evolved with social media, and unlike in previous decades, large, loosely organised groups such as the English Defence League are now not the prominent instigators. He said that now there are more amorphous networks where people will share information, such as on the messaging app Telegram. They may have disagreements about specific ideological issues, but will mobilise around events, which makes it harder to identify exactly when things are going to happen, because top-down structures don't exist as strongly as they did in the past, or they're not as important as they were in the past, he added. We told of outrage after the Saltire was co-opted as part of the Raise the Colours campaign, with flags popping up attached to lampposts in Glasgow. And an anti-racism campaign group is calling on Scots to oppose far-right backed protests in Scotland this weekend. And that article was written by Abby Garton Crosby and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday, the 16th of September 2025, from the Politics section. Robust Scottish labour market outperforms UK. This article is by Hamish Morrison. Scotland's jobless rate remained lower than the UK's, with new figures showing the number of adults out of work is down by 20,000 from 3 months earlier. The latest figures for May to July 2025 showed there were 2,660,000 Scots aged 16 and over who were in employment, while 96,000 were unemployed. The unemployment rate for the 3 months stood at 3.5%, lower than the 4.7% recorded across the UK as a whole. However, the employment rate for Scotland for May to July was 74.5%, slightly below the UK rate of 75.2%, according to the data from the Office for National Statistics, the ONS. The number of Scots who are unemployed is down by 20,000 when compared with February to April 2025, with the latest total, 31,000, lower than it was in the period from February to April 2024. Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes said, "Scotland's labour market remains robust despite economic challenges. To help more people enter the workplace, we're improving our employability services and have recently introduced enhanced services for those with disabilities and long-term health conditions." However, with a drop in payrolled employment across the UK as a whole, and recent figures showing that the UK growth is stalling, we need decisive action from the UK government to boost Scotland's economy. That's why we're calling for a reversal to the damaging decision to raise employers' national insurance contributions, which is hampering business confidence, investment, and costing jobs. And that article was by Hamish Morrison and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 16th of September 2025 from the comments section. Elon Musk's trolling of the UK cannot just be ignored. This article is by Shona Craven. Everyone knows the number one social media rule: don't feed the trolls. But what do you do if the world's self-declared chief troll officer is openly inciting violence among the citizens of the country you lead? You're in a fundamental situation here where, whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. These were the words of Elon Musk as he addressed Saturday's huge far-right rally in London. Dealing with this was the last thing Keir Starmer needed on Monday morning, as he wages his own personal fight back amid the increasingly loud rumblings of a leadership challenge reported in the weekend's newspapers. Musk claimed his message was aimed at the people in the reasonable centre who don't ordinarily get involved in politics and instead just go about their business. After declaring that the left is the party of murder in reference to last week's assassination of US political activist Charlie Kirk, he told the Union flag-waving crowds that, if this continues, that violence is going to come to you. Quite extraordinary words, even by the standards of this well-established agent of chaos. Musk has been prodding at Starmer for a while now, but his style of political provocation typically amounts to sharing inflammatory links and Twitter X posts accompanied by wow. Openly inciting violence clearly crosses a line and is an extremely serious matter. But at the same time, Musk is a fundamentally unserious person whose attention flits from issue to issue, country to country on a whim. He is never not trolling, even when the impact of what he posts and says could be a matter of life and death. Starmer responded yesterday via a spokesman stating that the last thing the British people want is this sort of dangerous and inflammatory language, which threatens violence and intimidation on our streets. He will doubtless be asked to go further and to give Musk even more of the attention he craves. A petition has been started calling for the X and Tesla boss to be banned from entering the UK, and he would surely be delighted if that were to actually happen. He could repeat his earlier claim that Britain is going full Stalin and claim this represented an attack on freedom of speech. If he faces no further consequences than a reprimand, he can point to other cases where incitement of violence has led to prison time and push the line that there is no fairness in the UK under two-tier Keir. The Prime Minister is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. He is, of course, currently gearing up for a state visit by Donald Trump, who has had plenty of skirmishes of his own with Musk. In recent months, the US President has declared him off the rails and a big-time drug addict, and even suggested he might look into having him deported. That last bit was just a joke. Or was it? That's the problem with these cavalier, obnoxious characters whose whims have such far-reaching consequences. They shoot their mouths off, cause a furore, and then backpedal as required with a wave of the hand. The joke's on us, they suggest, if we ever took them too seriously. BBC reporter Mike Wendling, who presented the Radio 4 programme Why is Elon Musk Trolling Britain?, describes the billionaire's posting style as hyperbole for the purpose of provoking a reaction and making a point, left pretty ambiguous as to how sincerely or ironically they are meant to be taken. Does Musk actually want to incite violence in the UK, or does he merely wish to make a point? Does he even want to make a point as opposed to just making mischief? One could, bizarrely, ask the same question of the man who last week murdered Kirk in Utah, who clearly shares in common with Musk the state of being chronically online. When it emerged that bullet casings found at the scene were engraved with messages, many assumed the killer's deadly hatred of the right-wing campaigner would be quickly explained. It was not to be. A coherent manifesto could hardly be pieced together from references to a meme, a video game, a song, and a playground insult. Yes, there was the line, "Hey fascist, catch," and lyrics from anti-fascism anthem Bella Ciao, but the overall impression given is of someone detached from the reality most of us inhabit, and perhaps more interested in achieving notoriety than agitating for any kind of political change. As Netflix series Adolescence is lauded with a brace of Emmy Awards, parents of young men may once again be asking if they truly understand the online lives their sons are leading, communicating in a grievance-inspired secret language even the FBI might struggle to reliably translate, where boundaries between the real world and fantasy, righteous revenge and deranged criminality are increasingly blurred. Musk is a grown man, but he behaves much like any other internet troll, not the statesman he briefly pretended to be. Unfortunately for the Prime Minister, he's not quite like any other troll, in that ignoring him won't make him go away. And that article was written by Shona Craven and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 16th of September 2025, from the comments section. We must accept the old world is dying and be ready for a fight. This article is by Jonathan Shafi. There's no denying the darkness of our time. From genocide in Gaza to the march of the far right at home, the stakes feel impossibly high. Previous certainties about our society are being thrown into disarray. Social media is becoming more maniacal by the day, and this is increasingly being reflected in the real world. As much as there is rage, there is confusion and a sense of encroaching derangement. There's an instability at the core of the system, itself grasping for some semblance of a direction and order. In the breakdown, all manner of dysfunction and depravity fills the void. The old world is dying, but the new is not yet born, as the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci put it in an earlier era. These are the times of monsters. But what can help in a situation like this is to come to some coherent understanding of what is going on. Because, let's be upfront, it's all getting a bit surreal. Anyone who was labouring under the illusion that society will somehow snap back to something like the pre-2008 financial crash should now have arrived at the conclusion that this is not only improbable, but impossible. What we are living through now is not a crisis of the Labour government or a temporary populist disruption in the form of Donald Trump. The issues are structurally embedded and systemic in nature. In addition, the social and economic crisis afflicting Western capitalism comes at the same time as the rise of the multipolar order. Liberal globalization has reached its terminal conclusion, and US hegemony over the world system is in transition. This means there are other regions of influence in which profits can be more sustainably extracted and headquartered. Europe, the UK and the United States are set for a long period of decline and strategic reorientation. It is within this context that Washington is becoming far more adversarial with its so-called allies. The extent of its political interference in domestic matters is unlike anything in the post-world era. Yes, Barack Obama did intervene in the Scottish independence referendum, but today there is something more disruptive at work. The Vice President cherry-picks who he has meetings with on his visits, aiming to consolidate a political wing in the UK. Gone are the formalities. JD Vance reposted a video claiming 1 million people had marched through London in memory of Charlie Kirk. The far-right demonstration, led by Tommy Robinson, did attract a large crowd, in my estimation around 200,000 people. But for the White House, the objective is to pour fuel into the fire by amplifying its reach and intertwining it with questions of political violence as a means towards extending fragmentation into the British sphere. Elon Musk addressed the rally and revealed this dynamic in blunt terms. You're in a fundamental situation here. Whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. That's the truth. It's not easy to conceive of a more direct provocation for a civil conflict. Tragically, many working-class people are being caught up in this, with pent-up frustrations being misdirected and placed into the hands of those who care nothing for their interests. Methods of destabilisation, which were once applied exclusively to countries in the global south, including the promotion of sectarian and tribalist strife, are now being deployed in the West. Known as the imperial boomerang, the repressive techniques utilised by colonialism abroad are in effect reflected back internally. What we're seeing coming into view now is a new transatlantic settlement in the mould of the Trump age. As the US negotiates its retreat from unparalleled global dominance, it insists on total control over its own hemisphere. At the same time, the jaded empire is itself under immense strain on any number of issues. In a sense, it didn't matter who killed Kirk, an act of violence to be condemned. What counted is who could control the narrative afterwards and to what opportunist political ends. Thus, Benjamin Netanyahu was quick to blame Islamists. For others, it was the left, or a media outlet they didn't like, or even liberal universities and academics. Consensus reality is being broken down in real time. Tens of millions of Americans believe the 2020 election was stolen. Once that kind of distrust is in the bloodstream, it's difficult in the extreme to combat, and it's only moving in one direction. It is a society that cannot hold together in its current form, as living standards continue to deteriorate and as its geopolitical position recalibrates. As a vassal state, the UK is being buffeted by the crosswinds. This is why we're likely to see a real turn towards authoritarianism and away from democracy. It is now becoming obvious that no party can resolve the crisis. Parliamentary politics will limp from one ailing leader to the next. That includes Nigel Farage, who many in the ruling class are now turning towards out of desperation. But decision-making about the country will become ever more divorced from a divided population and concentrated into the hands of the big corporates, the tech oligarchs, and a privatised security state. Saturday's demonstration was a public manifestation of the stage army being utilised in this effort. This is why the left must organise for the opposite. Democracy must be extended into the economy so that our resources are held in common. It means dumping the censorious culture which has developed in favour of a radical defence of protest and mass democratic politics. Trade unions must be strengthened, and the structures of working class association have to be rebuilt locally alongside national campaigns. Strap in for a bumpy ride, because one way or the other, everything is going to change. And that article was written by Jonathan Shafi and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 16th of September 2025 from the Culture section. Spain will not participate in Eurovision 2026 if Israel does. This article is by Fiona Brown. Spain will not be participating in Eurovision 2026 if Israel is allowed to compete, the state broadcaster announced. RTVE said in a statement on Tuesday that its board of directors had agreed by an absolute majority to withdraw from the song contest should Israel compete whilst it continues to enact genocide upon Gaza. Spain joins Ireland, Iceland, Slovenia and the Netherlands in its boycott of the 2026 competition in Vienna. The statement reads, "The RTVE Board of Directors agreed during its meeting on this Tuesday, September 16th, that Spain will withdraw from the Eurovision Festival if Israel is part of the event. The measure was taken at the proposal of the RTVE President, José Pablo López, with an absolute majority of the corporation's governing body." The final voting breakdown consisted of 4 votes against, 10 in favour and 1 abstention. The broadcaster had previously raised concerns to the European Broadcasting Union, the EBU, about Israel's participation in the contest. This decision makes Spain the first of the Big Five participating countries, which includes Germany, the UK, France and Italy, to withdraw pending the status of Israel's involvement. It follows official announcements from Irish and Dutch broadcasters, who also said their respective countries would not participate in next year's competition. A statement from RTE, Ireland's official state broadcaster, read, It is RTE's position that Ireland will not take part in the 2026 Eurovision Song Contest if the participation of Israel goes ahead, and the final decision regarding Ireland's participation will be made once the EBU's decision is made. RTE feels that Ireland's participation would be unconscionable given the ongoing and appalling loss of lives in Gaza. RTE is also deeply concerned by the targeted killing of journalists in Gaza and the denial of access to international journalists to the territory, and the plight of the remaining hostages. The Scottish Culture Secretary, Angus Robertson, also joined calls for the BBC and UK to withdraw from Eurovision 2026. He said on Saturday, "The BBC should join the growing number of broadcasters to boycott Eurovision if Israel is involved. The UK should not take part in the Eurovision Song Contest as genocide continues in Gaza." It comes as the UN published a report into Israel's activity in the occupied Palestinian territories, confirming that Israel has met all but one requirement for conflict to be considered genocide. The final decision on Israel's participation will be made in December, with Eurovision director Martin Green saying, "We understand the concerns and deeply held views around the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. We are still consulting with all EBU members to gather views on how we manage participation and geopolitical tensions around the Eurovision Song Contest. Broadcasters have until mid-December to confirm if they wish to take part in next year's event in Vienna. It's up to each member to decide if they want to take part in the contest, and we would respect any decision broadcasters make." And that article was written by Fiona Brown and read by Lynn McNeil.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 17th of September. A bill to scrap the not proven verdict to be debated in Holyrood. An article written by Gregor Young. Legislation which will scrap Scotland's controversial not proven verdict will lead to a clearer and more transparent system, the Holyrood Justice Secretary Angela Constance has said. The measure is just part of a series of changes planned for the justice system as a result of a Scottish Government bill that is facing its final hurdle at Holyrood. Scotland is the only country that has a not proven verdict, with jurors able to find an accused person either guilty or not guilty, or that the case against them is not proven. Like a not guilty verdict, it results in the accused person being cleared. However, with the not proven verdict said to be used disproportionately in rape cases, campaigners against violence against women have campaigned for it to be abolished. In addition to scrapping the third verdict, the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Bill also sets out to reform the jury process, requiring at least 2/3 of jurors to support a conviction before someone can be found guilty. The legislation also proposes the creation of a new independent Victims Commissioner and the establishment of a specialist sexual offences court, while also promising to give victims of such offences a lifelong right to anonymity. Other changes will see the parole board required to consider if killers have provided information on the whereabouts of their victims' remains when considering if they should be freed from prison, a move known as Suzanne's Law, after Suzanne Pilley, who was murdered in 2010 but whose killer has never revealed the location of her body. The Scottish Tories have insisted that common sense changes need to be made to the bill before they will back it, although the Scottish Justice Secretary insisted that if the landmark bill is passed, it will transform the experiences of victims and witnesses within Scotland's justice system. Ms Constance said the changes would mean that victims will be heard, supported, protected and treated with compassion, while at the same time the rights of the accused will continue to be safeguarded. Speaking about the proposals, she stated, key reforms include abolishing Scotland's historic not proven verdict for a clearer, fairer and more transparent decision-making process. There will also be a wholesale reform to the management of sexual offence cases, as we know these victims in particular, who are mostly women and girls, can be re-traumatised by the current system. The Scottish Justice Secretary continued, this legislation was shaped by the voices of victims, survivors and their families who have campaigned long and hard for further change. Parliament must stand with them and help ensure that the justice system doesn't just respond to crime, but helps those who have been harmed to rebuild their lives. The SNP has urged opposition parties to back the bill and to support victims, with Audrey Nicholl MSP saying the SNP has listened to victims, survivors, their families and support organisations. Throughout the process, the SNP has worked constructively across party lines to improve this legislation and to ensure that victims' rights are placed at the heart of our justice system. This bill creates a new sexual offences court, abolishes the confusing not proven verdict, strengthens victims' rights and establishes an independent commissioner to put victims and witnesses at the heart of our justice system. The SNP is delivering change. The question now is whether opposition parties will join us in supporting victims or try to block progress. An article written by Gregor Young. The National. Politics on Wednesday the 17th of September. Hitting the net zero target could cost £21 billion. An article written by Jane MacLeod. Reaching net zero could cost the Scottish Government an average of £700 million a year until 2050, a new report has revealed, with experts warning that the higher level of public spending needed north of the border could put pressure on the Scottish budget. New research from the Scottish Fiscal Commission looked at the financial implications of acting to try to tackle climate change in the period up to 2050. Professor Graham Roy, its chair, was clear that the cost of reducing emissions will have significant effects on public finances. He spoke at the Commission's report found that public spending on mitigation in Scotland is expected to total £21 billion over the next 25 years. With the bulk of that spending expected to come from the Scottish Government, the report said that the devolved additional public investment required could average £0.7 billion a year in 2024 prices from 2026 to 2050. Looking at the period from next year through to 2050, when the UK is due to reach net zero emissions, the report said public spending required in devolved areas is expected to be 26% more per person in Scotland than in the rest of the UK between 2026 and 2050. The funding received from the UK government would not be sufficient to cover the total costs of mitigation, and additional funding would have to be found from elsewhere in the budget. And the Commission warned this higher additional spending could put pressure on the Scottish budget. Professor Roy said that the long-term consequences of damages from climate change are going to be costly to individuals, the economy and to public finances. And he added that there would be crucial decisions for the Scottish Government in its upcoming climate change plan, due to be produced before the end of this Holyrood term. Professor Roy added, it's clear that more investment is needed in Scotland per person, and if these costs are picked up by the Scottish Government, that will have fiscal consequences. The Scottish Government was contacted for comment. An article written by Jane MacLeod. The National News on Wednesday the 17th of September. Job losses to hit Sky's Scottish campus in Livingston. An article written by Xander Elliots. Job losses are expected at broadcaster Sky's Scottish campus after the firm announced plans affecting some 900 employees. Sky is planning to cut around 600 jobs in the UK as it slims down its technology team following the launch of new streaming platforms. Sites affected include those working at sites in Leeds, Osterley and in Livingston, the home of Sky's first and biggest contact centre. The Central Belt also houses Sky's Consumer Champions Hub and its Sky Up Academy, where young people are trained in media work. Sky's plans to simplify its technology and wider teams come after a significant period of investment in its television platforms, broadband services and its mobile infrastructure, the firm said. The company now wants to focus on running its existing services. A spokesperson for Sky said, Over the past few years, Sky has launched a set of market-leading products, including Sky Glass, Sky Stream, and our full-fibre broadband service. These products are now firmly established and used by millions of customers, strengthening Sky's reputation for innovation and great service. As we look ahead, we're shifting our approach to bring customers the next generation of experience by investing in digital-first service, unbeatable content, and even better performance from our products, powered by the best of global innovation. The plans are reported not to be a cost-cutting exercise. Rather, the broadcaster wants to refocus efforts on improving its platforms instead of creating new ones. The firm, which is owned by the United States, Comcast, has been leaning more heavily on its technology operations around the world. The job reductions are understood not to be based on individual performance, and there will be opportunities to be redeployed to other roles within the business. An article written by Xander Elliotts. The National Politics on Wednesday the 17th of September. UK government told to stop indulging in denial. A front-page article written by Xander Elliotts. The UK government is under extreme pressure to end genocide denial and act against Israel after a key United Nations report concluded that there is a genocide in Gaza. Brendan O'Hara, the SNP's Middle East spokesperson at Westminster, noted it was just a few days ago that Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer had welcomed Israeli President Isaac Herzog to Downing Street. Mr Herzog is named in the United Nations report, along with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. Mr O'Hara said, "Here we have yet another report telling us what all of us can see with our own eyes every night on the news. There is a genocide happening in Gaza. The Labour government will be remembered in the history books for its complicity in a genocide whilst a humanitarian disaster unfolded, and this latest UN report should shame all who equivocated and stalled over doing the right thing by the Palestinian people." The question now is, how can Keir Starmer and his government continue to send arms to Israel and provide military support to the known war criminals, which the UN has said are committing genocide against the people of Gaza? First Minister John Swinney said that the UN report meant that silence and inaction is not an option. Too many innocent Palestinians have already died, and more will follow unless we see serious and urgent action from the international community to put an end to this horror, the SNP leader said. The case for imposing sanctions on the members of the government of Israel, who are now responsible, is now unanswerable. External Affairs Secretary Angus Robertson will today write to the UK government to again insist that it shoulders its unique historic responsibility to pressurise the Israeli government to change course and ensure a peaceful resolution. Amnesty International's crisis response manager Christian Benedict said that the UK government needed to stop indulging in genocide denial. "We welcome the UN Commission's findings that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, a significant and necessary moment," she said. Now the UK government must change its position and take action without delay. Its continued reluctance to officially acknowledge even the risk of the ongoing genocide in Gaza is increasingly untenable and stands in stark contrast to overwhelming legal evidence and the mounting consensus amongst international genocide scholars and human rights organisations. Under the Genocide Convention, all states, including the UK, bear a clear and binding legal obligation to act. This solemn duty, enshrined in international law, cannot be dismissed or delayed due to political convenience. Amnesty said that the UK government must end all UK arms exports to Israel, support the International Criminal Court and enforce its arrest warrants, including against Mr Netanyahu, implement International Court of Justice rulings in full. The court previously ruled that there was a plausible risk to Palestinians' right to be protected from genocide, ban all trade with Israeli settlements, adopt targeted sanctions against the Israeli officials most implicated in international crimes, and demand dismantling of apartheid and an end to Israel's occupation. The UN report's conclusions come after the International Association of Genocide Scholars also affirmed that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Other human rights groups, including Amnesty and the Israel-based B'Tselem, have also concluded that there is a genocide in Gaza. The UK government was contacted for comment. A front-page article written by Xander Elliotts. The National, on Wednesday the 17th of September. Opinion. The Mandelson scandal gets right to the heart of why Sir Keir Starmer's a poor Prime Minister. A column written by Seamus Logan. After he navigated Donald Trump's visit to Scotland a few weeks ago to the general, if sometimes grudging, approval of most, it probably shouldn't be a surprise that John Swinney pulled off last week's trip to Washington DC with similar aplomb. It made him the First Minister to meet a president in the Oval Office, and while trade and international relations are ultimately reserved matters, it's to be hoped that the First Minister's case on how tariffs on Scotch whisky also hurt the United States whisky sector has hit home with a president who seems to regard trade mainly as a way of keeping score. Something to be pleased about, then. The Scotch Whisky Association appeared to think so, Chief Executive Mark Kent remarking afterwards that the discussions had given the industry hope ahead of President Trump's state visit to the UK. Nothing is guaranteed, he said, but the First Minister's constructive discussion with the President, coupled with the continued efforts of the UK government, mean that the united cause of the Scotch whisky and the United States whisky industries to secure a zero-tariff deal have been heard. Rumour has it that Mr Swinney was able to bend the President's ear in Aberdeenshire because Keir Starmer left early and our First Minister promptly took the vacant seat beside President Trump. Alas, not everyone seemed so content. The high-pitched whine after the First Minister's return to Scotland came not from the engines of his aircraft, but instead from the newly appointed Scottish Secretary, Douglas Alexander, as he took to the airwaves to complain about the Scottish Government having somehow been playing politics with the issue. Oh dear, it sounds as if someone needs a hug. Perhaps Mr Alexander's equilibrium had been knocked a bit skew-whiff by the cluster burach emerging around Peter Mandelson, who was at that point still, if only just, the United Kingdom ambassador to the United States. An unconventional president like Donald Trump required unconventional diplomacy, say those Starmerites desperately seeking a plausible defence for why Mr Mandelson was ever appointed. There's also been whispered suggestions that Mr Mandelson might not have been completely candid with the Prime Minister about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein before he was appointed. To which I'd respond that in these turbulent times, this more than ever is the time for conventional diplomacy. And in terms of being unconventional, there's nothing remotely unconventional about the kind of creature produced by the insider classes who, like Mr Mandelson, spend their lives kissing upwards while punching downwards. To the end, Mr Mandelson seemed determined to cling to office. After his cringe-worthy birthday message to Mr Epstein was revealed, his attempt to spin about how there were more embarrassing messages to come, as if imparting this publicly might somehow make things more palatable than they finally did emerge, was just cringe-worthy. And I'm not sure who thought it was a good idea to start suggesting that the success of the state visit might depend on whether Mr Mandelson was around to act as some kind of Trump whisperer. But would you put it past Mr Mandelson himself to have been the source of these briefings? There's a great Irish expression for anything in politics which manages to be extraordinary in the worst possible way, and that's gubu, short for grotesque, unbelievable, bizarre and unprecedented. As tempting as it is to describe the Mandelson-Epstein revelations in similar terms, the fact is that for anyone who has watched him over the years, there was a grimly predictable glide path for how all of this would play out. Because every time he's resigned from a high-profile position, the pattern has been the same. Whether it was his hidden financial loan from Jeffrey Robinson trying to get UK passports for the Hinduja brothers, or as with Mr Epstein, seeing a means to ease his access to schmooze with the rich and powerful, each time his desire to ingratiate himself, to seek advancement and to satisfy a need for a lifestyle well beyond the means of a mere public servant has been at the root of his undoing. The way that Mr. Mandelson has filled his boots from public life over the years could almost make you think that the Free Gear Keir scandal was really just a storm in a teacup. But as Labour MPs seem to be slowly waking up to, this scandal gets right to the heart of Mr. Starmer's increasingly obvious lack of suitability for the job he holds. Inevitably, the focus has moved on to trying to find out who knew what and when, with much of the press at the time of writing trying to make something of how Mr. Starmer must have known about the full extent of Mr. Mandelson's relationship with Mr. Epstein at the same time that he was standing up to defend him in the House of Commons. But criticising Mr. Starmer solely for wanting to examine the evidence before deciding to sack Mr. Mandelson is in danger of missing the point. Because the key issue which should be in question right now is over Mr. Starmer's judgment on appointing him in the first place. This appointment was part of the symptoms and not the source of Mr. Starmer's problem, which is that he is a weak, indecisive leader lacking any kind of political direction or substance. That is the cause of nearly all of his current woes. And no amount of reshuffles or rebrands or sloganeering about change is going to be able to fix it for them now. A column written by Seamus Logan, who is the SNP MP for Aberdeenshire North and Murray East. The National News on Wednesday the 17th of September. Record high figure on people sleeping rough. An article written by Gregor Young. The number of people who reported having slept rough before making a homelessness application is at the highest level on record. Figures released yesterday show that the total rose from 1,932 in 2023-2024 to 2,465 in 2024-2025, a 28% increase. There was also a 17% increase in the number of people who slept rough in the 3 months before seeking support, rising from 3,058 to 3,579. The figures show that 17,240 households were in temporary accommodation on the 31st of March, an increase of 910 from the previous year. The number of children in temporary accommodation also increased by 1% to 10,180 during the same period, but this was a 2% decrease from the previous quarter. In total, the number of homelessness applications last year dropped slightly, falling from 41,054 to 40,688. But as of March the 31st, there were 31,695 live homelessness applications, slightly above the 31,513 recorded on the same day last year. The Scottish Parliament declared a national housing emergency last year, promising action. Housing Secretary Mary McCallan said yesterday that the figures showed the scale of the challenge we face, adding that the government must work to keep people in their homes in the first place. She said, "We know that more affordable housing is key to tackling homelessness, and despite the challenges of Brexit, austerity and the cost of living, the Scottish Government has a strong track record in delivering this. My Housing Emergency Action Plan will go further and commits up to £4.9 billion over the next 4 years to deliver around 36,000 affordable homes. This will provide family homes for up to 24,000 children." She also pointed to the pressure being faced in homelessness services, specifically in Glasgow, due in part to the UK government's mismanagement of the asylum system. Under the current arrangement, asylum seekers are required to vacate Home Office rented accommodation when they're granted leave to remain in the UK and can be forced to look to local authorities for help with housing. Ms McCallan called for more financial assistance for affected councils and said that she would raise the issue with a new Scottish Secretary, Douglas Alexander. Maeve McGoldrick, the head of policy and communications at homelessness charity Crisis Scotland, said that the figures laid bare a homelessness system at breaking point. She said, "It's particularly worrying to see such a large rise in people being forced to sleep rough. We know how dangerous that can be. People are entering the homelessness system and getting trapped there, while more and more local authorities are breaching their own legal duties. It's now obvious that when it comes to turning around rising levels of homelessness, short-term solutions just won't cut it. Aoife Deary, the housing spokeswoman at Citizens Advice Scotland, said, "Last year, the Scottish Citizens Advice Bureau network gave housing advice more than 62,000 times, an increase of 7% on the year before, with a particular surge in demand for advice on homelessness. We need the Scottish Government to immediately implement its Housing Emergency Action Plan, published earlier this month." An article written by Gregor Young. The National World News on Wednesday the 17th of September. Charlie Kirk suspect is charged. An article written by Gregor Young. The man accused of assassinating Conservative activist Charlie Kirk was yesterday charged with aggravated murder, meaning that he could face the death penalty if convicted. Announcing the charges, Utah County Attorney General Jeff Gray said, "The murder of Charlie Kirk is an American tragedy." Mr. Kirk was shot on September the 10th as he spoke with students at a university in Utah and died soon after. Prosecutors allege that Tyler Robinson, who's 22, shot Mr. Kirk in the neck using a bolt-action rifle from the roof of a nearby campus building. Mr. Robinson was also charged with felony discharge of a firearm, which is punishable by up to life in prison, and obstructing justice, which is punishable by up to 15 years in prison. He also faces 2 counts of witness tampering and commission of violence in the presence of a child. He was scheduled to appear on camera for a virtual court hearing yesterday. It's unclear whether Mr. Robinson had a lawyer. His family has declined to comment. Mr. Robinson was arrested late last Thursday near St. George, the southern Utah community where he grew up. Investigators have spoken to his relatives and carried out a search warrant at his family home in Washington, Utah, about 240 miles southwest of where the shooting happened. Mr. Kirk became a confidant of US President Donald Trump after founding one of the nation's largest political organizations. Turning Point USA had brought young conservative evangelical Christians into politics. While authorities say that Mr. Robinson has not been cooperating with investigators, they say his family and friends have been talking. Utah Governor Spencer Cox said that those who knew Mr. Robinson say his politics shifted left in recent years, and he spent a lot of time in the dark corners of the internet. FBI Director Kash Patel told the Fox News Channel show Fox and Friends that DNA evidence has linked Mr. Robinson to a towel wrapped around a rifle found near the Utah Valley campus and a screwdriver recovered from the roof where the fatal shot was fired. Before the shooting, Mr. Robinson wrote in a note that he had an opportunity to take out Mr. Kirk and was going to do it, according to Mr. Patel. The FBI is also looking at anyone and everyone who was involved in a gaming chat room on the social media platform Discord with Mr. Robinson, Mr. Patel said yesterday during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in Washington. Mr. Gray also read out text and statements which suggest people in Mr. Robinson's life were caught off guard by his alleged actions. He spoke about how Mr. Robinson's parents came to suspect their son's involvement in the shooting and eventually persuaded him to hand himself in with help from a family friend. And he read an alleged text exchange between Mr. Robinson and his roommate, who authorities say identifies as transgender and was in a romantic relationship with Mr. Robinson. The alleged text states that Mr. Robinson asked the roommate to check under a keyboard for a note. Finding it read, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it," Mr. Gray said. The Utah Department of Public Safety Commissioner Bo Mason said Mr. Robinson's partner has been cooperative. He said that investigators believe Mr. Robinson acted alone during the shooting, but they're also looking at whether anyone knew of his plans beforehand. In the days since Mr. Kirk's assassination, Americans have found themselves facing questions about rising political violence, the deep divisions that brought the nation to this point, and whether anything can change. Many Republicans have pushed to punish anyone they believe dishonoured him, causing workers to lose their jobs or face other consequences. An article written by Gregor Young.
This is from The National on Thursday 18th September 2025. From the comment section. Never forget the unifying power of the Scots Lead, by Emma Gray. At a time when Scotland and the UK are becoming increasingly divided by race, politics and wealth, a Scots saying has been doing the rounds on social media. We're a' Jock Tamson's bairns. It has gained new poignancy in recent weeks in response to the rise of the far right and the anti-immigrant sentiment it has been fostering. One post on social media explained it like this: "We're all Jock Tamson's bairns" is a Scottish expression meaning we're all the same under the skin, or we are all human beings. Jock Tamson represents every man, and the phrase promotes solidarity, mutual responsibility and compassion for all people, regardless of their differences or circumstances. With this in mind, I wanted to highlight the importance of the Scots language as a unifying tool. While there's no doubt we face serious issues, blaming outsiders and weaponising cultural symbols such as the saltire against them is not and never will be the answer. During a discussion I had with Scottish teachers a few years ago, it was noted that the Scots Lead has a huge potential in schools to help immigrants connect with their classmates if it's correctly taught. The fact that almost every tourist shop in Scotland welcomes tourists with items covered in Scots phrases is further proof that our language is a welcoming part of our national identity. So I was proud when former First Minister Humza Yousaf used Scots to defend himself after being told to go back to where you come from, after rightfully stating that the saltire belongs to everyone who calls Scotland home. He wrote, "If I'm not Scottish, how come I can rhyme in Scots?" before writing an amusing poem about his detractor using a number of classic Scots words, including radje, wee and bohied. The post went down a storm, with the majority of ex-Twitter users, and it has been viewed by a staggering 1.9 million people at the time of writing, brilliantly demonstrating the power of the Scots Lead to unify. While a minority accused Yousaf, a second-generation immigrant, of still not being Scottish, despite his use of Scots and the fact that he was born in Rutherglen and grew up in a country, they were conveniently forgetting the fact that modern Scotland would not be thriving the way it is today without the contribution of immigrants. If you go back far enough, everyone in Scotland is technically an immigrant. The first people to settle in our wee country came from mainland Europe, following the most recent Ice Age in 12,000 BC. Since then, we have developed our own proud national identity, welcoming settlers from all over the world. The Scots language has also been demonstrating this on TikTok, where Scottish Black TikTok has become a sensation by proving that many Scots speakers are not white. One social media user observed, "Scottish Black TikTok is taking over my timeline, and I'm happy, appalled and a bit amused." Happy that people are starting to realise how diverse Scotland is. Appalled that this wasn't really known before and we could do with a bit more diversity. And amused by the bemusement at the accent. The contributions made to this country by immigrant-born Scots and immigrants can't be underestimated. Just last week, Scottish poet Jackie Kay, who is of Nigerian descent, won Scots Bairns Book of the Year at the Scots Language Awards for Coorie Doon, which features a child of colour on the cover. We Scots come from many backgrounds, and the idea there is only one way to be racially Scottish is, quite frankly, preposterous, given that almost all of us are immigrants, or should I say, Jock Tamson's bairns, in one way or another. That's why it's so important to focus on the things that bring us together, like language. Whether that's by laughing at humour, such as the former First Ministers, or currying doon to read stories like Kay's. That article was by Emma Gray. This is from The National on Thursday, 18th September 2025, from the Culture section. Ministers told to reject Flamingoland plans for Loch Lomond for good. By Gregor Young. The Scottish Government should reject the controversial development plans for the shores of Loch Lomond for good, the Greens have said. Scottish Green co-leader Ross Greer will join campaigners opposed to the Flamingoland development at Holyrood on Thursday, urging ministers to throw out the plans. Lomond Banks, owned by theme park operator Flamingoland, has proposed to build more than 100 lodges, 2 hotels, a water park, monorail and parking spaces for more than 300 cars at the site on the southern shores of the loch at Balloch in West Dunbartonshire. In May, the government's reporter granted an appeal and approved planning permission in principle to the development, but placed 49 conditions on the application. The developer has urged ministers to see through the hysteria on the issue and apply the rules fairly. Greer said, "After 10 years, this saga must now come to an end. Local people have made their feelings known time and time again. They have been joined by over 150,000 people from across the country, expert organisations such as the Woodland Trust and the National Park's own board and planning officers." Government ministers rightly recalled the outrageous decision of their officials to let these daft proposals go ahead, but that only happened because tens of thousands of us came together to show the strength of the public's opposition to Flamingoland. He continued, "This has gone on for far too long. It is time for the Scottish Government to let local people get on with their lives. They must save Loch Lomond by throwing out Flamingoland's destructive plans for good." A Scottish Government spokesperson said, ministers decided to recall the Lomond Bank's appeal as the proposed development raises issues of national significance in view of its potential impact on Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park. As this is a live planning appeal, it would not be appropriate to comment further. That article was by Gregor Young.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and tell your friends about our service.